My family thought I was crazy when I refused to sell my grandfather's hot air balloon. I was always a shadow in our family. My brother Zach, he's the golden boy. Future lawyer with a smile that could charm a jury into pardoning Satan himself. Me? I'm just a guy who forgets to turn off the coffee maker and gets blamed when the electric bill spikes. That's been the story of my life in Stillwater, Oklahoma. Population small enough that everyone knows your business before you do. Our house was that typical middle-class suburban setup. Not fancy enough to brag about, not shabby enough to complain about. Just there, like me. My parents are what you call practical Americans. Dad sells insurance, Mom teaches third grade, and both believe the path to happiness is paved with 401 Burmese chots and sensible sedan purchases. Alex, my dad would say while watching football with that disappointed sigh he perfected over years of practice, were you going to figure out what you're doing with your life? Your brother's already got his law school applications ready. That was the soundtrack of my teenage years. Comparisons to Zach punctuated by reminders that dreaming wasn't a viable career option. But then there was Grandpa Howard, Mom's dad, Vietnam vet turned local legend, the guy who bought a hot air balloon with his pension money and scandalized the entire family in the process. Howard's flying over Johnson's cornfield again, shouting Elvis lyrics. Neighbors would report, equal parts annoyed and amused. That was my grandfather, the man who refused to age gracefully, who blasted music from the 1950s while floating through Oklahoma skies like some kind of time-traveling wizard. The first time I flew with him, I was 16 and struggling through the unique hell that is high school when you're neither popular nor talented enough to join any particular clique. Grandpa showed up at our house in his beat-up truck one Saturday morning, knocked on my bedroom window, and asked if I wanted to escape gravity for a while. Mom rolled her eyes. Dad muttered something about encouraging impractical habits. But for the first time in forever, someone was inviting me specifically, not as an afterthought, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. The balloon itself looked like it belonged in another era, bright patches of red, blue, and yellow fabric sewn together into something that shouldn't logically leave the ground. The basket was worn but sturdy, with a small propane tank and burner system that Grandpa treated like a temperamental pet. This old girl's got personality, he'd say, patting the wicker. Manufactured things these days, they're too perfect. No soul. This balloon? She argues with me sometimes. Our first flight became a ritual. Every other Saturday, weather permitting, Grandpa would pick me up, and we'd head to the open field behind his small farm where he kept the balloon. The preparation was always the same, unfolding the envelope. That's what balloon people call the actual balloon part. Connecting the basket, running through his pre-flight checklist that he'd recite in a mock serious pilot voice. Propane levels, check. Wind direction, check. Elvis cassette, double check. Yes, a cassette. Grandpa refused to upgrade to digital. Music sounds more authentic when it's fighting to be heard, he'd insist. And so, blue suede shoes would crackle through a portable player as we'd lift off, the ground falling away beneath us. Up there, between earth and sky, was the only place I felt I could breathe fully. The smell of fresh coffee from Grandpa's ancient thermos, the occasional blast of heat from the burner, and the incredible silence that comes when you're floating above the world. It was freedom in its purest form. See that, Alex? Grandpa would say, gesturing at the patchwork of farms and forests spreading below us. From up here, you can't tell who owns what land, who's got the biggest house, or who's got the fanciest car. Up here, everyone's story looks the same, just tiny pieces of a bigger picture. Then he'd look at me with those weathered eyes that had seen war and peace and everything in between, and add the words that became my North Star. In the sky, boy, you don't have to prove anything to anybody. When I graduated high school with average grades in no particular direction, my parents had to talk about community college and realistic expectations. Zach was heading to University of Oklahoma with a scholarship. I was heading nowhere. That summer evening, I escaped to Grandpa's farm. He found me sitting by his old barn, throwing pebbles at a rusty bucket. "Sky's perfect tonight," was all he said. We flew higher that evening than ever before. The sunset painted the horizon in colors that no phone camera could ever capture properly. Something about the light, the silence, and maybe the fact that I was at a crossroads made everything feel more significant. "Did I ever tell you why I bought this balloon?" Grandpa asked as we hovered over the town water tower. I shook my head. It had always just been part of who he was, like his flannel shirts and the way he could tell dirty jokes with a completely straight face. "After Vietnam, I couldn't sleep indoors for nearly a year," he said quietly. "Felt trapped. Ceilings seemed like they were collapsing. One night, I slept in an open field, and for the first time since coming home, I didn't have nightmares. It was a sky, endless, open, no walls, no traps, just possibility." He went quiet for so long, I thought that was the end of the story. "Took me 30 more years to save enough to buy this old girl," he finally continued. "Should have done it sooner. Some dreams, Alex. You can't afford to put on layaway." That night, back at his farmhouse, Grandpa disappeared into his bedroom and returned with something I'd never seen before, an old pilot's helmet, worn around the edges, with faded lettering I couldn't make out. "This was my buddy Mike's," he said, turning it in his gnarled hands. "Helicopter pilot. Braver than me by a mile. Didn't make a home." He placed it on the kitchen table between us. "When I'm gone, you'll carry my sky forward," he said, pushing the helmet toward me. I laughed, uncomfortable with the sudden seriousness. "You're going to outlive all of us, Grandpa. You're too stubborn to die." He just smiled, that smile that made the corners of his eyes crinkle. "Stubbornness only takes you so far, kid. Eventually, gravity wins." 3 weeks later, gravity won. Heart attack, quick and sudden. The kind doctors call massive, as if the size of the medical term could somehow match the size of the hole left behind. The funeral was exactly what Grandpa would have hated. Somber, traditional, with the pastor talking about a Howard that none of us actually knew. The Real Howard would have wanted Elvis playing in stories about his balloon adventures, not Bible verses and hushed voices. I stood apart from the family cluster, watching as distant relatives who hadn't visited in years dabbed at dry eyes and reminisced about a sanitized version of my grandfather. Such a shame about that farm. I overheard my Aunt Gloria's stage whisper to my mother, "And that ridiculous balloon. What's going to happen to all that now?" Mom shrugged, glancing at me briefly before turning away. Dad always did what he wanted, not what made sense. The reading of the will was 2 days later. I showed up in my only suit, squeezed between Zach and Mom, on a leather couch in a law office that smelled like furniture polish and expensive cologne. Mr. Grayson, Grandpa's attorney, cleared his throat dramatically before delivering the news that sent a ripple of shock through the room. "To my grandson, Alexander James Mitchell, I leave my entire estate, including the farm property at 1420, County Line Road, all its contents, and my hot air balloon, which you will know better than anyone how to appreciate. May you always find freedom in the sky, kid." The silence that followed was thick enough to cut with a knife. Then came the murmurs. The balloon? Couldn't the old man have left something normal, like a toaster? Aunt Gloria's voice carried across the room, followed by nervous laughter. I didn't laugh. I couldn't. All I could think about was Grandpa's voice, saying those words about carrying his sky forward. He hadn't been joking. He'd been preparing me. Later that day, I drove out to what was now my farm. My farm. The concept was too big to wrap my head around. The property wasn't much. 15 acres of mostly uncultivated land, a small farmhouse that needed work, and a large barn where Grandpa stored the balloon and its equipment. The barn door creaked as I pushed it open. Inside, the afternoon light filtered through dusty windows, illuminating particles floating in the air and casting long shadows across the concrete floor. And there it was. The balloon envelope folded neatly, the basket on its side, and all the equipment organized with military precision on shelves along the wall. On top of a workbench sat Grandpa's old helmet. I picked it up, the weight of it familiar from that kitchen table conversation that now felt prophetic. Something fell from inside it. A cassette tape labeled simply for Alex, in Grandpa's distinctive blocky handwriting. I found an old player in the house and pressed play with shaking fingers. The tape hissed and popped before Grandpa's voice filled the room. "Alex, if you're listening to this, then gravity finally caught up with me." A chuckle, So familiar it made my chest hurt. The farm's not worth much, and the balloon's seen better days, but they're yours now. Do what you want with them. Sell them if you need to. I won't haunt you much. A pause, and I could almost see him gathering his thoughts the way he always did, looking up at the sky for answers. But remember what I told you. The sky isn't a place, it's a choice. Every time you feel trapped, look up. That's where freedom lives. The tape clicked off. I stood in that barn, holding the helmet, surrounded by the remnants of Grandpa Howard's dream, and felt the weight of inheritance that had nothing to do with property or possessions. What was I supposed to do with a rundown farm and a balloon that smelled like Grandpa's Old Spice cologne? I was 19, directionless, with no skills other than being able to identify cloud formations from our balloon trips and recite Elvis lyrics by heart. The practical thing, the thing my parents would want, would be to sell everything and use the money for college or some other responsible adult purpose. But as I stood there, Grandpa's voice echoed in my head, "The sky isn't a place, it's a choice." I felt something stirring inside me, something big, something terrifying, something that felt like purpose. I didn't know what I was going to do exactly, but I knew it involved that balloon and that wide-open sky that had given Grandpa his freedom. I was still standing there, holding the helmet, when my phone buzzed. A message from Dad. "We need to talk about what you're going to do with that property. Your mother and I have a proposal that makes sense for everyone." I stared at the message, my throat tightening. I already knew what their proposal would entail, and I felt myself suffocating just thinking about it. Dad's message wasn't just a message. It was a declaration of war. The next morning, there was in my inbox a detailed email explaining how we all agree the farm and balloon should be sold. Apparently, Zach needed money for law school, and this inheritance of mine was the perfect solution to a problem I didn't create. I read that email 5 times, each time feeling my blood pressure climb another notch. The audacity of it all. They hadn't even waited a full week after Grandpa's funeral before trying to cash in on his life's passion. And the worst part? Not once did anyone ask what I wanted to do with my own inheritance. My phone rang 3 times that day. I ignored each call. Instead, I drove back to my farm, and walked the property line, trying to see it through Grandpa's eyes. The old fencing needed repair. The barn roof had more patches than original material, and the small farmhouse looked like it had given up hope somewhere in the early 90s. But as the sunset painted the Oklahoma sky in shades of amber and gold, I understood why Grandpa had loved this place. The horizon stretched uninterrupted in every direction. No neighbors peering over fences, no traffic noise, just a whisper of wheat fields and the occasional call of a meadowlark. I slept that night in Grandpa's house, on a couch that smelled like mothballs and pipe tobacco. By morning, I knew I couldn't sell. Not yet, not without trying to understand what this place had meant to him. The family dinner that weekend was a trap, and I walked right into it. Mom had prepared her famous pot roast, the meal she always made when she wanted something. Dad had broken out a bottle of whiskey he'd been saving for a special occasion. Even Zach had come home from college for weekend, which should have been my first clue that something was up. The ambush came between the main course and dessert. "So, Alex," Dad began, swirling his whiskey in a way he thought made him look sophisticated, "have you had time to think about our proposal? You mean your demand that I sell Grandpa's farm so Zach can go to Harvard Law instead of merely Yale Law?" The words came out sharper than I intended, but I was past caring. Mom's fork clattered against her plate. "That's not fair, Alex. This is about what makes sense for everyone. Everyone except me and Grandpa," I muttered. Dad leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Do you even have a plan? Any idea what it costs to maintain that property? The property taxes alone will eat whatever savings you have." He wasn't wrong about that. My bank account had exactly $847.32 in it, hardly enough to resurrect a failing farm and an aging hot air balloon. "Maybe I want to fix up the balloon," I said, more to see their reactions than anything else. The looks exchanged around the table would have been comical if they weren't so insulting. Part pity, part exasperation, as if I'd announced plans to become a professional unicorn trainer. "So you want to be the second Howard?" Dad's voice rose an octave. Live in that broken-down shack and sing Elvis to the cows? That's your big ambition. Zach snickered, not even try to hide it behind his napkin. Classic Alex, always picking the path of most resistance. Something inside me snapped. All those years of feeling second best, of having my dreams dismissed before I could even form them properly. It all came boiling up. Better singing to cows and living someone else's life. I fired back. At least Grandpa died doing what he loved, not what everyone told him was practical. Mom gasped. Dad slammed his glass down hard enough that whiskey sloshed over the rim. Zach's smirk froze in place. You don't mean that, Mom said quietly. But I did. God help me, I did. I moved onto the farm the next day, throwing what little I owned into the back of my 2005 Ford Ranger. It wasn't much, some clothes, my laptop, a box of books, and a coffee maker, one I remember to turn off. Thank you very much. The farmhouse looked even worse in full daylight than it had at dusk. The kitchen linoleum was peeling up at the corners. The bathroom faucet dripped with the persistence of Chinese water torture, and there was a distinctive smell of mildew coming from somewhere I couldn't quite identify. But it was mine, the first space that had ever truly belonged to me. I spent that first week cleaning, repairing what I could, and taking inventory of what Grandpa had left behind. The place was a time capsule of his life. Vietnam memorabilia mixed with balloon equipment catalogs, Elvis records, and enough tools to stock a small hardware store. In his study, really just a converted pantry off the kitchen, I found stacks of notebooks filled with his flight logs. Each entry was meticulous, detailing weather conditions, flight paths, and observations. Flight number 204, July 14th, 98. Sunset journey over Miller's Ridge. Spotted 3 deer by the creek. Life is worth flying for. Reading his words, I could almost hear his voice, feel his presence in a room with me. These weren't just logs. They were chapters of his life, moments he'd treasure enough to record for posterity. Or, maybe for me, among the notebooks, I found a folder marked Alex's Training, filled with articles about balloon piloting, FAA regulations, and maintenance tips. He'd been preparing me for this handoff long, before either of us knew it was coming. It was in the third drawer of his desk that I hit the jackpot. A metal box of cassette tapes with a false bottom. Underneath lay $5,100 bills, neatly stacked and wrapped with a note. For emergencies or adventures, choose adventures when possible. $5,000. Not a fortune, but enough to start something. The next morning, I listed my pickup truck on Craigslist. By afternoon, it was gone, replaced by another $4,200 in my pocket. Combined with Grandpa's stash, I had just over $10,000. Seed money for a dream I was only beginning to understand. The balloon itself was in rougher shape than I remembered. The envelope fabric had patches upon patches. The basket wicker was splitting in places, and the burner system needed a complete overhaul. A local balloon specialist I found online gave me an estimate that made my stomach drop. $15,000 minimum to make it airworthy again. I was $5,000 short, with no income and mounting property expenses. My parents called the news a reality check and renewed their offer to buy the farm. I countered by applying for a small business loan at 3 different banks. 2 rejected me outright. The third, a local credit union where the manager had once flown with Grandpa, approved me for $7,500 with the farm as collateral. Your grandfather was a character, the manager told me as I signed the paperwork. Told me up in that balloon that I should quit banking and become a poet. Said my soul would thank me. He chuckled. I didn't take his advice, but I never forgot that flight. It was the first time I realized Grandpa's legacy extended beyond our family, reaching into the community in ways I'd never appreciated. The next 3 months became a blur of restoration work, FAA certification studying, and ramen noodle dinners. I enrolled in a balloon pilot training program 2 towns over. The only student under 40 in a class full of retired engineers and board executives looking for weekend hobbies. My instructor, Hank, was a crusty old Texan with a handlebar mustache and a vocabulary colorful enough to make a sailor blush. He took one look at my practice flight path and declared, "Son, you're flying like a drunken bumblebee." More precision, less panic. I laughed, but I didn't quit. Couldn't quit. Every time frustration threatened to overwhelm me, I'd head back to the farm, sit in the barn beside Grandpa's half-restored balloon, and listen to one of his old cassettes. The balloon itself was transforming under my hands, and the expertise of a retired balloon maker I convinced to consult for free beer and stories. We replaced damaged panels with new fabric that maintained the original color scheme, but added subtle Elvis silhouettes visible only when the sun hit just right. I installed a Bluetooth speaker system disguised as vintage equipment, my secret modernization that would allow me to play Grandpa's music with better sound quality than his old cassette player had ever managed. The basket got new wicker where needed, a fresh coat of varnish, and a small memorial plaque. Howard's legacy, because the sky is a choice. I sank every penny into that balloon, that dream. The final touch was repainting the exterior of the basket, a purchase that drained my account to $47.83. My elderly neighbor stopped by as I was applying the final strokes and tilted his head critically. "Looks like a giant 4th of July cake," he observed. Howard would have loved it. Always was a patriotic Sinophagon, coming from old Jim, who'd known Grandpa since Vietnam. This was high praise indeed. The morning of my first solo flight in the restored balloon, I woke before dawn, jittery with anticipation and terror. The weather forecast promised perfect conditions, light winds, clear skies, and temperatures in the low 70s. If there was ever an ideal day to test whether I'd wasted my inheritance on an impossible dream, this was it. I'd passed my FAA certification a week before, surprising even Hank, who'd gruffly admitted, "You might not be the worst pilot I've ever trained. Top 5 worst, maybe, but not the absolute worst." In Hank speak, this was practically a love letter. The inflation process went smoothly. The burner roared to life. The envelope slowly rose from its sprawled position on the grass, and the basket righted itself as the balloon took shape. Everything Grandpa and Hank had taught me came together in that moment. The checklist, the safety procedures, the feel of when things were going right. As the balloon strained against its tether ropes, eager to ascend like a living thing, I hesitated only once, to place Grandpa's old pilot helmet in the basket beside me, not to wear, just to have along for the ride. Then I released the ropes and felt the earth fall away beneath me. That first ascent was nothing short of magical. The balloon rose steadily through the cool morning air, the ground expanding below me like a map being unfolded. I could see the farm, my farm, growing smaller, becoming part of the patchwork landscape that Grandpa had loved so much. The burner's roar, the gentle swaying of the basket, the incredible silence when I cut the flame. It was all exactly as I remembered from our flights together, yet entirely new because I was in control. I was the pilot now. When I reached 2,000 feet, I pulled out my phone and connected it to the speaker system. Elvis's "Can't Help Falling in Love" filled the basket, as clear and beautiful as if the king himself were floating alongside me. And that's when it hit me, a wave of emotion so powerful I couldn't have fought it if I tried. Tears streamed down my face as I realized Grandpa was there, had been there all along, in every repair I'd made, every logbook I'd read, every skill I'd struggled to master. I wasn't flying alone. I never would be. The sunrise painted the clouds pink and gold as I drifted over fields my grandfather had flown above hundreds of times before. In that moment, I understood what he'd meant about the sky being a choice. It wasn't just about flying. It was about choosing your own path, your own perspective, your own way of moving through the world. When I finally brought the balloon down in the same field I'd launched from, a landing Hank would called slightly less catastrophic than Hindenburg, I felt different, centered, purpose-filled. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into creating a business plan. I registered Sky Memories tours with the state, built a simple website showcasing the restored balloon, and designed brochures highlighting the unique experience of seeing Oklahoma from above. My vision wasn't just joy rides. I wanted to offer something meaningful, flights that celebrated milestones, honored memories, or simply provided a perspective shift that Grandpa had given me. Each tour would include a personalized playlist, stories about the landscape below, and Grandpa's philosophy of finding freedom in the sky. I was ready. The balloon gleamed in the sunlight. My playlist hummed with vintage classics, and my permit paperwork was in perfect order. Sky Memories Tours was officially open for business. But as I stood beside my freshly painted mailbox at the end of the farm's driveway, watching cars speed past without slowing, I realized the hardest part wasn't restoring the balloon or getting certified or even finding startup money. The hardest part would be convincing others to believe in my dream as much as I did. As it turned out, dreaming was a whole lot easier than making other people believe in your dreams. 2 weeks after launching Sky Memories Tours, I received exactly 3 phone calls. One was a wrong number looking for Joe's auto parts. Another was Mom asking if I'd come to my senses yet. The third was from an elderly couple who'd flown with Grandpa years ago and wanted to see Howard's sky one more time. The Millers arrived on a Tuesday morning wearing matching windbreakers and carrying a thermos of coffee that could have been Grandpa's twin. Mrs. Miller clutched a faded photograph of her and Mr. Miller posing with Grandpa beside the balloon circa 1999. The flight itself was perfect. Calm winds, clear visibility, and the kind of sunrise that makes even non-believers suspect there might be something greater out there. When we landed, Mrs. Miller squeezed my hand with surprising strength for someone in her 80s. "Howard will be proud, young man," she whispered. "You've got his spirit in the way you watch the horizon." They paid the full $275 fee despite my offer of a Friends of Grandpa discount, then drove away in their immaculately maintained Lincoln Town car. And just like that, I was back to waiting by a phone that refused to ring. The local paper ran a small feature about local Vietnam vet's grandson, continuing balloon legacy, but it was buried on page 12 between an ad for denture adhesive and the church bake sale schedule. The 3 Facebook ads I could afford generated plenty of likes, but 0 bookings. By the end of the month, my bank account was giving me anxiety attacks. The balloon loan payment was due, property taxes were looming, and I'd started calculating exactly how many packets of ramen constituted a nutritionally survivable diet. Zach's text didn't help. My darling brother had taken to sending me hot air balloon memes with captions like career inflation problems and rising to new heights of unemployment. Mom called weekly with job listings at insurance companies and retail stores, her voice dripping with that special blend of concern and disappointment only mothers can perfect. After one particularly demoralizing call, where Dad got on the line to remind me that the farm could still fetch a decent price in this market, I texted back something I immediately regretted. "Maybe I'll just apply at McDonald's, so you can all finally be proud of me." Zach responded with a gif of Ronald McDonald in a balloon. I had to admit, it was pretty funny. The Stillwater Harvest Festival seemed like my last shot at drumming up business. I spent 3 days designing flyers featuring balloon at sunset, complete with cheesy taglines like "Elevate Your Perspective" and "Oklahoma's Most Uplifting Experience." The print shop guys snickered when I picked them up, but I was past caring what anyone thought. The festival was peak small-town America, funnel cakes, rigged carnival games, and country music blaring from speakers that had seen better days during the Clinton administration. I set up my booth between a lady selling homemade jam and a guy hawking with carvings of bears fishing for 6 hours. I smiled until my face hurt, handing out flyers to anyone who would take them. Most people glanced at the paper, made polite noises about how interesting it looked, then immediately tossed my dreams into the nearest trash can. Flying? In a balloon? One man actually laughed. "Why would I pay to do that when I've got Netflix and air conditioning at home?" By mid-afternoon, my spirit had deflated faster than a balloon with a pinhole leak. I was packing up early, mentally drafting my surrender speech to my parents, when someone picked up on my flyers and actually read it. "Sky Memories Tours," she read aloud. "That's either genius branding or the most Oklahoma thing I've ever heard." I looked up to find a girl about my age wearing denim overalls over a vintage Rolling Stones t-shirt, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun. She had a professional-looking camera hanging around her neck and an expression that couldn't decide between amusement and curiosity. "It's a bit of both, I guess," I admitted, trying to remember how normal people had conversations when they weren't desperately trying to sell something. She introduced herself as Emily, a 22-year-old film student at Oklahoma State working on her thesis documentary about disappearing Americana, small-town traditions, and businesses being lost to time and technology. "So you actually fly this thing?" she asked, tapping the photo of my balloon. When I explained the whole story, Grandpa's legacy, the restoration, my failed business launch, she didn't laugh or look pitying. Instead, her eyes lit up like I'd handed her a winning lottery ticket. "You're either a genius or the weirdest guy in Oklahoma," she declared, "and I can't decide which would make a better story." Before I could figure out if I'd been insulted or complimented, Emily was peppering me with questions about flight paths, balloon aesthetics, and whether I consider letting her film a ride. "People don't read newspapers or brochures anymore," she informed me with the confidence of someone who'd grown up in the social media age. "You need TikTok, Instagram Reels, something visual to catch attention." I must have looked skeptical because she added, "Trust me, one good 60-second video could do more for your business than 1,000 flyers." Having nothing to lose except my remaining dignity, I agreed to take Emily up the next morning. She arrived at dawn with more equipment than I thought one person could carry: cameras, tripods, something called a gimbal, and enough enthusiasm to power a small city. Morning people should come with a warning label, I muttered, still on my first cup of coffee. Emily just grinned and started setting up shots of the balloon inflation process. By the time we were ready to launch, she recorded enough footage to make a feature-length movie. The flight itself was different from any I'd done before. Seeing the landscape through Emily's lens, the way she captured light streaming through morning mist, the balloon's shadow racing across fields, my hands adjusting the burner, made me realize I'd been marking the experience all wrong. This wasn't just a ride, it was a story. Each person who stepped into that basket was entering a narrative about freedom, perspective, and connection to something larger than themselves. Emily filmed everything. My pre-flight checks, the way the balloon responded to altitude changes, even my face when I pointed out landmarks Grandpa had noted in his flight logs. When I mentioned his philosophy about the sky being a choice, she made me repeat it 3 times from different angles. "That's gold," she said. "Pure narrative gold." After we landed, Emily stayed another 2 hours getting context shots of the farm, the barn, and Grandpa's pilot helmet. She promised to edit something together within a few days, though I tried not to get my hopes up. For days later, my phone buzzed with a text from Emily containing just a TikTok link. With the spotty farm Wi-Fi, it took forever to load, but when it finally played, I barely recognized my own story. She cut together a 59-second video that somehow captured everything: dawn light filtering through balloon fabric, the burner flame reflecting off my face, sweeping shots of the Oklahoma landscape from above. The background music was a Platter's "Only You," one of Grandpa's favorites, and she'd overlaid key moments with text quoting both me and Grandpa. "The sky isn't a place, it's a choice." The final shot was a slow pan from the horizon to Grandpa's helmet sitting in the balloon basket with text reading, "Sky Memories Tours, because some moments belong above the clouds." It was beautiful, professional, moving, and according to the view counter, it had already been watched 47,000 times in just 9 hours. By that evening, the count had reached 120,000. By the next morning, 300,000. My website, which had previously seen traffic measured in single digits, crashed from too many visitors. My business email inbox filled faster than I could read the messages. Mom called, her voice unusually hesitant. "I saw a video of you and a balloon online. One of my students showed me. It's really something, Alex." Even Zach texted, "Dude, are you going viral? My girlfriend's mom shared your video." My girlfriend's MOM. The next 2 weeks were a blur. Emily helped me set up proper social media accounts and taught me the basics of content creation. We filmed follow-up videos showcasing different aspects of the experience. Sunrise flights, the history of Grandpa's balloon, the restoration process. Each video emphasized the emotional connection, the sense of floating in a space between memories and dreams. Emily called it experiential marketing. I called it finally telling the right story. The booking started slowly at first. A young couple wanted to celebrate their anniversary, a photographer seeking aerial shots, a local real estate developer hoping to impress clients. Then came a request that stopped me cold. Someone wanted to scatter their grandfather's ashes from the balloon. I politely declined the Ash's request, partly due to FAA regulations and partly because it felt like territory I wasn't ready to enter. But it made me realize how deeply personal this experience could be for people. You're not selling balloon rides, Emily pointed out as we reviewed the growing list of bookings. You're selling transformation, perspective shifts, the chance to see their world from a vantage point that changes everything. She was right. Every person who booked wanted something beyond just floating through the air. They wanted to feel what Grandpa had felt, what I now felt each time the ground fell away beneath me. Emily's videos continued to gain traction. She laughingly told me I came across as a farm hipster on camera, authentic, but with just enough quirk to be interesting. I replied that farm hipster beat guy who failed at business within a month by a considerable margin. With each flight, I grew more confident, adding personal touches that made the experience unique. Custom playlists based on passengers' musical tastes, stories about the landmarks below, even a celebratory toast with sparkling cider upon landing. The reviews were better than I could have hoped for. People used words like magical, life-changing, and perspective-altering. One woman wrote that seeing her hometown from above had given her the courage to finally move away for her dream job. A man in his 70s said the flight had reminded him of possibilities he'd forgotten existed. Emily documented it all, turning customer stories into content that brought in more customers. We weren't just marketing a balloon ride. We were showcasing transformations. Then came an email that left me staring at my screen, throat tight with emotion. The subject line read simply, "Thank you for the sky. I booked a flight for next Saturday." The message began. I wanted you to know why. My grandfather was a pilot who flew small planes over Oklahoma in the 70s. He used to tell me that people who never leave the ground only know half the world. When I saw your video, I heard his voice for the first time since he passed 10 years ago. My grandfather loved the sky too. Thank you for reminding me. I read the message to Emily over coffee the next morning. She didn't say anything, just squeezed my hand briefly before turning to her camera equipment. That booking wasn't just another customer. It was confirmation that this wasn't just about me and Grandpa anymore. It was about all the connections between people in the sky, all the memories tied to seeing the world from above, all the freedom found in floating above problems that seemed insurmountable from ground level. Every person who stepped into my balloon brought their own story, their own reasons for wanting to touch the sky, and helping them find their piece of heaven. I was expanding the legacy Grandpa had left me. The business was still precarious, still one bad weather month away from serious trouble. But for the first time, I could see a path forward that didn't end with selling the farm and crawling back to my parents in defeat. It wasn't just about making money anymore. It was about creating a space where people could experience what Grandpa had given me. Perspective, freedom, and a profound understanding that most of life's boundaries exist only from certain angles. After a particularly moving flight with a father and son celebrating the boys' graduation, I stood watching their car disappear down the farm's dirt road. Emily beside me reviewing footage on her camera. "You know what I realized today?" I said, more to the horizon than to her. The sky isn't just mine and Grandpa's. It's a place where everyone can find themselves. And my job is to help them get there. Emily lowered her camera and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "That," she said quietly, "is exactly what your next video needs to be about." Emily's suggestion became our mission. Within a week, we launched a #SkyNostalgia campaign, a series of videos showing real people experiencing real moments of connection in the balloon. No scripts, no actors, just authentic reactions captured in the basket as Oklahoma spread out beneath us. The first video featured a couple celebrating their 40th anniversary, when the husband teared up at 2,000 feet while describing how they'd met at a drive-in theater that now existed only as an abandoned lot visible from our flight path. Something about the rawness of the moment resonated. The video hit 500,000 views in 3 days. People began booking flights specifically requesting to share their stories on camera. A young woman surprising her boyfriend with a birthday flight. A teacher bringing along photos of her students to show them what the world looks like when you dream big enough. A Vietnam veteran who'd served with Grandpa, wanting to experience what his old buddy had loved so much. Each flight, Each story became content. Each piece of content brought more bookings. Emily's film school friends started helping with editing, creating a distinct visual style for Sky Memories that was part nostalgic Americana, part modern emotional storytelling. By the end of our third month in business, we'd gone from struggling to stay afloat to booking 3 weeks in advance. The Sky Memories YouTube channel hit 50,000 subscribers. Our TikTok followers passed 200,000. Local businesses started reaching out about partnerships and cross-promotions. The success brought practical challenges. I was now flying twice daily when weather permitted, with maintenance and preparation eating up the hours between. My voice grew hoarse from narrating the same landmarks, though I tried to make each tour feel unique. The balloon, while sturdy enough, wasn't designed for such heavy commercial use. "We need a second balloon," Emily announced one evening as we sat on the farmhouse porch, reviewing the next day's bookings. "You're going to burn out, and we're turning away too much business." She was right, as usual. The next morning, I called the bank that had given me my initial loan. The same manager listened to my pitch, looked over my now impressive books, and approved financing for a second balloon with significantly better terms than my first loan. Amazing what a little success can do for your credibility. The new balloon became a project almost as exciting as the restoration of Grandpa's original. We designed it as a deliberate throwback to the 1960s, bright red and white panels, with a logo inspired by the iconic Route 66 shield. The basket featured vintage-style leather accents and brass fittings that gleamed in the sunlight. "Elvis Express," Emily declared when we unveiled it. The name stuck immediately. With 2 balloons, we could expand our offerings. We created themed experiences. Sunset Serenade featured local musicians playing acoustic guitar in a basket while we drifted over the Oklahoma landscape at dusk. Fields of Freedom took passengers over the vast wheat fields and cattle ranches that embodied the spirit of the American heartland. Grandparents' Glory became a special tour designed for elderly couples, with a slower pace and more stories about how the region had changed over decades. The old barn transformed into a proper office, with Grandpa's pilot helmet hanging prominently on the wall. I insisted on keeping some things sacred. His helmet never flew again, but it watched over every launch and landing. Each flight included at least one of his philosophies, my favorite being, "Fly while you can, the ground will wait." Emily moved her film equipment into the corner of the barn, officially becoming Sky Memories' creative director, though titles seemed silly for a business still run primarily from my kitchen table. Her documentary about disappearing Americana evolved into a chronicle of our unexpected success story, with Sky Memories as a central thread connecting stories of tradition, innovation, and the American entrepreneurial spirit. The business kept me so busy that I almost missed my brother's text with a link and the message, "Look who's famous." Clicking it opened the website of our local TV station and a feature story. Oklahoma balloon business soars to social media fame. There I was, grinning like an idiot beside Grandpa's balloon, with a headline celebrating exactly what my family had once mocked. Dad called that evening, his voice doing that thing where he tried to sound casual while saying something meaningful. "Your mother and I saw you on the news," he began. "Looks like you might not be such a fool after all." High praise from a man who measures success in 401k contributions and mortgage payments. I could hear the grudging pride beneath his practical exterior. Zach's response came via Instagram, commenting, "Congrats, bro, but don't get a big head about it," on one of our most popular posts. I laughed, typing back, "Sorry, Zach, can't hear you from up here. The signal's bad at this altitude." For all the external validation, the most meaningful moments remain private, like when Emily and I installed a small memorial plaque inside the original balloon's basket, engraved with Grandpa's words, "The sky isn't a place, it's a choice." Or when I paid off the initial balloon loan 6 months early, sending a thank you basket to the credit union manager who believed in me when no one else would. The farm itself began to transform. The leaky roof got fixed. The bathroom faucet stopped its maddening drip. Fresh paint covered the peeling walls. I planted a small garden in what had once been Grandpa's vegetable patch, finding unexpected peace in the rhythm of tending growing things between flights. Emily joked that I was becoming a hipster homesteader, documenting my agricultural attempts for social media with the same enthusiasm she showed for our balloon content. Her suggestion that we sell Sky Memories merchandise led to heated debates about authenticity versus business opportunity. I'm not selling out Grandpa's legacy for t-shirt sales, I insisted during one particularly passionate discussion. What about I survived a flight with Alex shirts? She countered with that mischievous smile. That's just truth in advertising. I had to admit she had a point. We compromised on tasteful merchandise that emphasized the experience rather than commercializing it. Vintage-style travel posters of our balloon over Oklahoma landscapes, handcrafted compass keychains with "Find Your Sky" engraved on them, and yes, a limited run of shirts with "I found my sky with Sky Memories tours" in classic Route 66 inspired typography. The merchandise sold surprisingly well, creating another revenue stream that helped fund improvements to the balloons and property. By our 6-month anniversary, Sky Memories had grown from my desperate attempt to honor Grandpa into a genuine small business success story. Local papers did follow-up features. A regional tourism magazine put us on their cover. A popular travel YouTuber with 2 million subscribers booked a flight and brought along their entire film crew. Even the bank that had initially rejected my loan application reached out about exploring future partnership opportunities. Through it all, I tried to maintain what had made Sky Memories special in the first place: the personal connection, the authentic experience, the sense that each flight was about something more meaningful than just seeing the view. Every morning before the first launch, I'd touch Grandpa's helmet for luck, just as I imagined he once had. Every evening after the final landing, I'd review the logbook, adding my own observations alongside flight data, continuing this tradition of recording not just where we'd gone, but what we felt along the way. One Tuesday afternoon in late autumn, I welcomed an elderly woman for a private flight. Mrs. Catherine Lawson had booked the grandparents' glory package, though she arrived alone, clutching a small wooden box and looking simultaneously nervous and determined. As we ascended, she remained silent, watching the horizon with tears gathering in the corners of her eyes. Only when we reached cruising altitude did she begin to speak, telling me about her husband, James, a crop duster pilot in the 1970s who had loved the Oklahoma sky more than anywhere on Earth. He crashed in '78, she said softly. Engine failure over Roberts County. I've been earthbound ever since. Couldn't bear to fly without him, but couldn't bear to leave Oklahoma either. So I've been looking up at the same sky he loved, but never found a way back into it. Until I saw your videos. We floated in silence for several minutes, the only sound the occasional burst of the burner keeping us aloft. Then she opened the wooden box she brought, revealing not ashes as I'd initially feared, but a small model airplane, meticulously detailed and obviously treasured. I don't want to scatter anything, she clarified, noticing my expression. Just wanted him to have one more flight, in a way, to feel close to him in his element. We took James the crop duster for his final Oklahoma sky tour, with Catherine pointing out farms where he'd once worked, the small airfield where he kept his plane, and the spot where they'd had their first date under the stars in 1965. When we landed, Catherine hugged me with surprising strength for someone so physically frail. "Thank you for this piece of sky," she whispered. "Howard would be so proud of what you've built." As she turned to leave, she pressed something into my hand, a faded photograph of a young man in a flight jacket standing beside a yellow crop duster, his smile as broad as the Oklahoma horizon behind him. "For your collection," she said. "So you remember that you're not just giving people rides. You're giving them back pieces of themselves they thought were lost forever." That evening, after everyone had gone and the farm had settled into cricket-chirping quiet, I placed James Lawson's photo beside Grandpa's helmet in our office. Two men who had never met, connected by their love of flight, now watching over this unexpected business born from memory and passion. I sat in Grandpa's old desk chair, feet propped up, studying that photograph and thinking about legacy, about how we're remembered not just through possessions passed down, but through the experiences we create for others, the perspectives we share, the freedom we help them find. Sky Memories had become more than a tourist attraction or a social media sensation. It had become a kind of memory bank, a repository for stories about the human relationship with the sky, with freedom, with seeing familiar landscapes from new perspectives. Every person who climbed into our baskets brought their own history and left with it somehow transformed. Every flight added another layer to the legacy Grandpa had begun when he first looked up and decided that the ground wasn't enough. As I stare at that photograph of a man I'd never met, but somehow now felt connected to, I realized this wasn't just a business. It was a heritage, and somehow I had become its keeper. I needed to ensure it lived forever. It's strange how quickly 2 years can pass when you're building something you love. Looking back from where I stand now, it's hard to believe that Sky Memories tour started with just one patched-up balloon, 0 customers, and a whole lot of doubt from everyone who supposedly knew better. Today, we operate 5 balloons across 3 states: Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Texas. The company logo, a stylized balloon silhouette with a horizon line that subtly forms the letters SM, appears on highway billboards, regional tourism guides, and even a few national magazine features. Not bad for a kid who once forgot to turn off the coffee maker. The expansion wasn't planned so much as it was inevitable. After our first year of success in Oklahoma, inquiries started coming in from neighboring states. Why not bring Sky Memories to their skies? At first, I dismissed the idea as too ambitious, too corporate. But Emily, ever the visionary, saw it differently. Your grandfather didn't limit himself to one piece of sky, she pointed out while we were updating our business plan one rainy afternoon. Why should you? She was right, as usual. Grandpa would have laughed at the idea of keeping something as boundless as the sky confined to a single location. So we took the leap, partnering with small regional airports to establish Sky Memories launch sites in strategic locations across the Midwest. Our staff grew from just me and Emily to a team of 15, including pilots, ground crew, content creators, and customer experience specialists. I made a point of hiring veterans whenever possible, a nod to Grandpa's military service. These former military pilots brought discipline, safety protocols, and their own sky stories to our growing narrative. Tom, an ex-Army helicopter pilot who served in Afghanistan, became our chief training officer. Sandra, who flew transport planes in Iraq, managed our Arkansas operation. Each veteran added their own chapter to the Sky Memory story, connecting Grandpa's Vietnam-era service to modern military aviation heritage. As the business expanded, my relationship with Emily evolved too. What began as a professional partnership morphed into something deeper, like those Oklahoma thunderstorms that roll in gradually but then suddenly fill the entire sky. We were working late one night, reviewing footage for our next marketing campaign, when I realized I couldn't imagine building this legacy with anyone else. The proposal wasn't planned, no hidden ring, no elaborate setup, just a simple question asked under the stars beside Grandpa's original balloon. Emily didn't hesitate. "I've been waiting for you to catch up," she laughed, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. "I knew you were the one when you told me you want to make a career out of an inheritance everyone else thought was worthless." Our wedding was small but meaningful, held on the far with Grandpa's balloon tethered nearby as a silent witness. 6 months later, we christened our newest balloon, a state-of-the-art model with custom features and cutting-edge safety systems. We named it Howard's Heart, painting it Grandpa's favorite shade of blue with cloud-white accents. The most special feature wasn't visible. Inside the control panel, we'd installed a small digital recorder that played Grandpa's voice from that old cassette he'd left me, "Fly, boy, fly." Only the pilot could hear it, a private encouragement at the beginning of each journey. Technology became our ally in expanding the Sky Memories experience. We launched a mobile app where customers could customize their flights, selecting music playlists, choosing routes, and even dedicating their journey to someone special. The app featured virtual reality previews of flight paths and allowed users to create digital postcards from their own footage. Our most popular offering, Howard's Legacy, combined the traditional balloon experience with modern storytelling. Passengers received wireless headphones that played a carefully crafted audio narrative about the history of ballooning, Grandpa's journey, and philosophical reflections on what it means to leave the ground behind, all synchronized to specific moments during the flight. Success brought financial security I'd never imagined possible. The farm transformed from a rundown property into a thriving headquarters with renovated buildings, beautifully landscaped grounds, and a small museum showcasing ballooning artifacts. Grandpa's original helmet remained the centerpiece, displayed alongside James Lawson's photograph and dozens of other mementos gifted by passengers who'd found meaning in our flights. But money was never the point. One of our most rewarding initiatives didn't generate a cent of profit: monthly charity flights for children from low-income families. Watching kids experience their first moment of weightlessness as a balloon left the ground, seeing their eyes widen as familiar landmarks shrank beneath them, hearing their breathless questions about how high we could go, these moments mattered more than any sales figure. As Grandpa used to say, the sky belongs to everyone. Making that statement a reality became our mission, ensuring that the transformative experience of flight wasn't limited to those who could afford luxury adventures. My family's attitude evolved with our success, though old patterns die hard. Dad finally took a flight, clutching the basket edge with white knuckles, but admitting afterward that he could see why people might enjoy this. Mom became our unofficial promoter at her school, organizing field trips and educational programs about aviation science. Zach, now a practicing attorney, still sent the occasional snarky text, but his tone had shifted from mockery to something closer to grudging respect. When he successfully defended a small aviation business in a complex regulatory case, he called to share the news, adding awkwardly, "I thought about you guys during the trial." From Zach, this practically qualified as a declaration of brotherly love. I forgave them all their earlier doubts. How could I not? They were simply trapped in the same ground-level thinking I might have succumbed to without Grandpa's influence. They had their sky. I had mine, different perspectives, different choices, but family nonetheless. Emily joked that I'd become the hot air balloon king of the Midwest, a title that made me laugh every time. Better to be king of the sky than prince of an office cubicle, I'd reply, knowing how close I'd come to that alternative reality. Despite our growth, I still piloted flights regularly, refusing to become just the administrative face of Sky Memories. On my 40th flight with a young couple celebrating their engagement, the woman asked if I'd always been passionate about ballooning. The question transported me back to my childhood, to my first flight with Grandpa. I remembered clutching the basket edge, terrified as we left the ground, my knuckles white just like Dad's had been. Grandpa had noticed my fear and knelt beside me, his leathery hand covering mine. "Fear is just the ground holding on to you," he'd said softly as the earth fell away beneath us. "Let it go, and you'll find there's nothing to be afraid of up here." I shared this memory with the couple, realizing as I spoke that I'd finally managed to let go of everything that had once held me down: expectations, doubts, the need for approval, the fear of failure. Everything except my love for the sky and the legacy Grandpa had entrusted to me. Last month, Emily and I took our newest balloon, Freedom Flyer, on its maiden voyage over the Grand Canyon, a bucket list journey we'd been planning for years. As we floated above that magnificent landscape, the sunset painting the canyon walls in impossible colors, I pulled out Grandpa's old cassette tape, the physical object itself, not the digital recording. I held it up against the backdrop of the canyon, this small plastic rectangle that had changed the course of my life. Emily took a photo that would later become the cover image for our company's 5-year anniversary book. As Frank Sinatra's My Way played through our speaker system, Grandpa's second favorite after Elvis, I felt a profound sense of completion, not an ending, but fulfillment of the promise I'd made in that barn 5 years earlier, standing among the remnants of Grandpa's dream with his helmet in my hands. "You were right, Grandpa," I said to the open sky. "Freedom is when you choose your own sky." Emily squeezed my hand. Her filmmakers, I no doubt calculating the perfect angle to capture this moment, but her heart fully present in our shared journey. Together, we transformed an inheritance most people saw as worthless into something invaluable, not just a business, but a living legacy. The family I'd once felt so alienated from had slowly come around, finding their own ways to connect with my chosen path. The family I'd built, Emily, our team, and the community of sky lovers we'd gathered, had become my foundation, stronger than any I could have imagined for myself. People often ask why I still work so hard when the business is doing well enough that I could step back. Why I still fly regular routes when we have plenty of capable pilots. Why I insist on personally checking each balloon before its first flight of the day. They don't understand that this was never just about building a successful company. It was about honoring a promise, about carrying forward a way of seeing the world, about making sure that the freedom Grandpa found in the sky remains accessible to others searching for their own perspective. I'm sharing this story not because I've become wealthy or famous. Those sky memories have certainly done better than anyone, especially my father, predicted. I'm sharing it because someday one of you might find herself at a Sky Memories launch site, or in another balloon somewhere in the world, or simply looking up at the boundless blue above you. And in that moment, you might feel what I felt with Grandpa on that first flight. That incredible sense of possibility that comes when you leave the ground behind, when limitations fall away, when you discover that most boundaries only exist from certain angles. If my story resonates with you, it's probably because you have your own version of the sky, some passion or purpose that others might not understand, some inheritance of the heart rather than the wallet, some dream that seems impractical until you're brave enough to pursue it. My advice? Let go of the ground that's holding you. The sky is waiting.